So welcome, everyone. Do take a seat. I'd love to get started with our fantastic panels. So our topic is, as you probably saw, always on transformation, and specifically, how do leaders lead in much more volatile times? I'm Judith Wallenstein. I lead BCG's global CEO advisory practice, where that is obviously an often discussed question. And I remember a group of new CEOs, all roughly 10 months in their tenure, just when the pandemic was done. And one came into our discussion and said, wow, I thought once COVID would be over, my job would be so much easier. And one of his peers looked at him and said, come on, if you can't stand the heat in the kitchen, you shouldn't do the job, which was not necessarily the most uplifting start to a discussion about the challenges of leading as a CEO. But what I'd like to put first is, if you look at the data, it's undeniable that the multiple layers of challenges CEOs face today are a very different dimension than what we saw a decade or 2 decades ago. And that literally ranges from the whole host of societal expectations that lands on you as leaders, and where your employees feel that you're the people who should answer them. It continues to the geopolitical and trade dynamics of the day. There's the climate crisis. So you just see that the amounts of volatility that are driven by factors outside your business have certainly increased and basically are on the daily agendas of CEOs. So to discuss what that means, and not only how the challenges present themselves, but specifically to discuss how they found individual solutions to that, I have 3 fantastic discussion participants. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. Vasili's is the CEO of Athens Medical Group, and I hope to learn a lot from you, not only how you look at current volatility, but also how you've managed a lot of the past volatility in the market. Giannis, you lead Titan Cement in Europe. That's obviously an industry that's dealing with profound change every single day. And Andreas, you're the CEO of Olympia Group. So a whole range of very different businesses with very different dynamics. Thank you all for joining. And Andreas, I'd love to direct my first question to you. You probably remember a year ago, the WEF in Davos put the Poly crisis as this title on the conference. But if we are a bit less dramatic and we say, yes, we acknowledge, you look at 23 and 24, and these are very volatile years. How do they look from the perspective of your businesses?
Thank you, Judith. And thank you for attending after lunch. My previous presentation was before lunch, and everybody was eager to go for lunch. Now, I think, hopefully, you are more calm. So I think we need to recognize the term perma-crisis. Somebody thought about it, and I think it's a wise description. Volatility was always there. Many people think that if there is no volatility, this is bad news. We need volatility. What is different now is that the sources of volatility are volatile. I hope I have expressed it properly. So we cannot predict what brings volatility, and it's a continuous change. And that makes the reflexes and the reactions a bit more difficult. The second comment, reflecting the diversity of businesses that belong to my group, is that some industries are mature enough, and therefore volatility can be absorbed by much more robust organizations. If you take the retail industry, there's a lot of volatility in the retail industry. For instance, the dilemma between e-commerce and stores. People thought carelessly that everything was going to go digital, and they start shutting down their shops. Now they run to open shops, but this is something that you can absorb. Non-mature industries, like for instance the energy and battery investments, each investment is 2 billion. If you make it wrong, there's no survival there. So and it's a very volatile industry, geopolitics, demand, technology. So yes, volatility is a fueling mechanism because it makes us all on our toes to think and react, but if it goes beyond a level, the organism cannot take it.
Giannis, I'd like to come to you. I mean, you manage a business that probably has looked at volatility for a decade, not just for the last 2 years. So what would you like to add to Andreas? So how does this, what's tougher in the current business environment for you than it was 5 years ago?
Yes, thank you, Judith. I would like to maybe take a different perspective in terms of the time horizon. So yes, there is a lot of volatility, and we have been through a lot of volatility over the years. But right now there is an overarching change that is happening, which is driven by the climate crisis and by the need of society for low-carbon products. And this is a change that is going to substantially and completely transform our business model. We're changing the products that we are offering completely. We're changing the way we are producing. Our plants, you mentioned the investment, Andreas, we are investing completely in plants that are going to consume less carbon through the fuels, use renewable electricity, and in a few years produce zero carbon cement. We are sourcing new materials, but we're also transforming the products and what we're selling. So going from a commodity to selling a wide range of products that address the climate change crisis, but are also focused on the needs of each customer. So a huge transformation, which fortunately is happening at a time where our business is strong and robust. So we need to manage today's business and use it as a basis to make this big transformation we have embarked on.
If you look at that fundamental transformation of your business that you're describing, what has been the most challenging part in taking your organization along?
I think there are many challenges, Judith, on that. I think the main challenge on any business, especially businesses where you don't have what one calls a burning platform, is that the business fundamentals are very solid, and yet you need to reinvent your business in anticipation of something that you're seeing is coming. And creating this awareness and this excitement has been the biggest challenge, and I can tell you a bit about how we did that, if you want.
Mm-hmm. I'm happy to. We'll come back to that. Vasily, I would like to look back with you a bit longer. Your company basically is one of the pioneers of private healthcare in Greece. I guess the last 10, 15 years haven't been easy years for that. How did you get the company successfully through that phase?
Right. Well, let me say first that doing business in Greece, you can only be certain about one thing, that you will be dealing with uncertainty. So there are continuous, let's say, sources of uncertainty. One of them is the international, let's say, climate and what is happening there. The other one are the local circumstances, but we also have to deal with the particular circumstances of our sector. So these three elements combined constitute a major challenge. And we have faced such two challenges in the recent years. Actually, it was the financial crisis of Greece, and it was, of course, the COVID crisis. So we had two back-to-back crises, which were, unprecedented, and leadership was called upon to be creative, to find solutions in order to continue this legacy. The company will turn 40 years this year. I'm the CEO since 2003. So I'm more proud, I could say, about the ways that we managed to be resilient and deal with the crisis rather than, the successes that we had. So in financial crisis, I think that we dealt in a different way. Actually, we are a family-owned company, in essence, but at the same time, we're listed on the Athens Stock Exchange. So it's a hybrid model, I should say, and we try to get the best out of the two worlds. So at the time of the crisis, actually, it was the family element that was the most useful one, because we sat at a table at an office, the chairman, who is my father, the vice chairman, who is my brother, and myself, and of course a few of our executives, and we tried to strategize on how to navigate through this crisis. So we decided that the company had the depth and the ability and the financial resources not to, let's say, follow the market example horizontal costs and deterioration of the services offered, because we're not dealing with any kind of service. We are dealing with provision of healthcare. So we didn't have the luxury to do that. So we decided to finance our way through the crisis, even with family-owned capital, so that when the crisis would be over, and eventually all crises at a certain point get over, we will be in the strongest position in the industry, in a pole position, and on top, the people would have appreciated what we did. And when I say the people, I mean the patients who entrust our health to us, but also our employees. And I think it's very important to have this kind of culture where the employees, of course, look upon you and, you feel at some point that you should act as a shield to these 3,000 people, but it's very rewarding in the end, because once you have put the vision and you have put the goal, everybody works towards that end. And just to conclude about the COVID crisis, our first concern was to protect, first of all, the health care of our own people, so that they would be healthy to provide the services to people, to incoming people. So we have created our own protocols, safety measures, patient flow, so that patient will not be contaminated, etc. So we dealt in very unique and very tailor-made, let's say, ways, and eventually we were successful.
Basically used creativity to create pockets of security in,
yes,
in an uncertain situation.
Out of the box approaches, I would say, yes.
I'd like to shift us a bit to the question of how do you tackle these deeply transformational situations as leaders? And Yanni, you just said it's not easy to mobilize an organization and make people excited, you said, when there's no burning platform. So if you think back of that, what did that mean for you very personal as a leader? What did you do differently than you had done it before?
Well, yes, there is the personal dimension and the, let's say, the tools that we used. If I may focus a bit first on the tools, because I think that's something, an experience that's actually quite recent and interesting to share with our guests. The main thing is not to explain what we want to do, but why we want to do it. And I think this is also as a personal job to understand that a big part of this transformation has to do with communication and internal communication. So in our case, the whole process, which of course involves understanding what the markets want, what society wants, what technological developments are happening, and how we're going to get there. The bigger part is how do you communicate that internally? So we embarked in parallel on a process that took almost a year, where we decided to look again as a total organization at our values and at our purpose. And this was not a one-way communication. This was an interactive process, getting a lot of inputs through more than 2,500 employees worldwide, getting inputs, getting chats, and so on. And we ended up with something that we all feel very proud of. So we have a purpose, which is to make the world around us a safe, a sustainable, and an enjoyable place to live in. And we know that we do that based on some fundamental values. You mentioned culture. Culture is very close to values. So our values are that we care about our stakeholders and about our people. The values are that we dare to change. So we really promote the transformation. We think of the long term, we build to last, and we walk the talk. So this is not just talking, we actually deliver. And I realized that what we have managed to do with this is to explain and to mobilize not around what we want to do, but why we want to do it. And once you have done that, and you come back through continuous communication, through celebrating successes that match the values and the purpose, through appreciation, you build the momentum that you need to move on.
I find that very interesting, Yanni, that you said it's a much more indirect way to create that momentum, and it requires a different way to lead. Andreas, I'd like to hand to you with that, because if you look at the evolution of your career, you've been a Chief Transformation Officer for big chunks of your career. Now you're the CEO of a company that's much more a holding structure. How do you lead through a transformation if your role changes?
Transformations, as we've said before, are either outside in So something happened to the outside environment, you feel the risk. Or it's from within, whereby you try to commit people into that, the necessity of changes. But when you do it from within, it's a much harder role because you have to convince people that the very little details that they complain every single day that something goes wrong and things could be better, if you pull it all together, it justifies a mega transformation. At the very beginning, everybody says yes, yes, yes. Then when they realize that these little things to change need mega changes, that they even involve themselves, you may get a different reaction. Now, in a holding organization, transformation is a quite different challenge because you have to manage other transformations that the investee companies, for instance, have themselves. But the hardest challenge is to transform a holding company. For instance, a family-driven company to become a fully professional with corporate governance and an agenda of asset management. The successful transformations are those that have a very clear enemy. People, troops get mobilized when there is an enemy. There's a football enemy, you have to beat somebody. There's a war, you have to beat somebody. Even in organizations, people get mobilized when they see risk, threat, or an enemy. In an asset management company, that's a much more difficult story because the enemy is the existential enemy in the long term. So how do you bring long term in the short term? Well, you have to take levers. You have to take levers on things that perhaps go wrong or things that perhaps people talk that I wish I had. For instance, I wish I had more systematic decision-making. I wish I had more data-driven decision-making. You pull all these things and you synthesize a web and you try to make the web as strong as it can, so you throw the web on all these people and then you lock them in. Now, continuity is a difficult story because family companies may tend to have to lose, let's say, energy or to lose enthusiasm. So therefore, you have to retain enthusiasm all the time. How do you retain enthusiasm all the time? Very little wins. So for instance, the corporate world, some things are given. Reporting, following up. In family businesses, this may not be as important. But when you bring it in, people realize, oh my God, I didn't know that the entire organization was doing that, all these things every week. So therefore, you need a currency. A currency. In the corporate world, the currency could be KPIs. In an asset management company, the currency may be different. So therefore, you have to map all the ingredients of a transformation. What is the trigger? What makes us unite? What is the plan? To have a plan, to have a frame, a time frame that is not infinite, because then people, again, lose their energy, and to stick to the plan. There are many similarities, but there are some big dissimilarities that you have to respect. And this is what I'm trying to do just right now.
Thank you. Vasily, you said it before, you're a hybrid, you're a family-owned company that's also listed. You also said you're a second generation. What does that mean for the way you lead the company?
Well, in a way, you need to prove year on year that you are not there, first of all, because it's a family legacy and that entitles you to run the company. No. It's, I would say, an additional burden that you need to address. And of course, another burden is that you need to ensure the continuity of the company with the third generation, which of course does not mean that by definition the next CEO has to carry your surname. At the same time, of course, you need to have a concrete, a solid, let's say, family governance policy in place. And of course, being listed at the same time, you need to have corporate governance. And I'm very proud to say that we're very successful in both. Actually, we're a listed company, and we are among, as classified by the Greek Stock Exchange, we are among the top 10 listed companies in terms of transparency on the Athens Stock Exchange. So this is, I think, a very important element that you have to equally take care of.
Is there anything, as you said, you want to make sure you have the legitimate role taking it over? You're not just there because the second generation has the same name. You hand over to a third generation that might be operationally involved or not anymore. What's hardest for yourself in that as a leader?
Well, I think that a leader is judged by what he's doing in his time of leadership, but also by who he chooses to be his successor. Mm-hmm. So I would love one of my 4 kids to be my successor, but if that would not be to the interest either of them or of the company, mm-hmm. it will not be the case.
Let me stay with this topic and explore that with all of you. You said you'll also be judged by who you pick as your successor. I'd like mm-hmm. to amplify that to who do you pick as your leadership team. So in the changes you've all described that you have driven, that you are driving, you can't do it alone. Obviously, there's this enormous role of your team. Andreas, how do you look at the point where you've done it many times, like all of you, where you feel, wow, now my team, I've created a really high-performing leadership team. What does it take for you?
First of all, at least in Greece, the phenomenon that a new leader, a new CEO appears and wipes out everybody and brings a new team does not exist. So you have very quickly to realize that you have to work with the people that are there, but not the ones you see in front of you. Typically, there are many people hidden in the cupboards, lots of talent that has been wasted, so you have to be very energetic in order to discover talent within the organization. From time to time, you need to bring people from outside, but in all my experience, anywhere I've worked, there were hidden talent. You may ask, why were they hidden? Mostly because either they were not understood, or the strategy was different, and therefore they were not needed. So when you bring in and you have a new strategy, you have to find people that will align to a new strategy. Whoever doesn't align to the new strategy cannot follow you. And you have to take some hard decisions. And it's not people-driven, the decisions, it's strategy-driven. You have a strategy, you have to invite people to follow the strategy. If they don't, you will fail. But in that journey, you cannot make the changes in one day, and this is difficult. So you have to have patience and to build the leadership team for a long period of time. You have to utilize internal resources. If you don't utilize internal resources, you will be seen as an outsider, that you just came in to either show off or to destroy the organization. And then you have to stick to the purpose and the strategy of the organization. And this is the best way to choose your leadership team going forward. Now, having chosen your leadership team, especially the outsiders, sometimes you have to be harder with them than the ones you found already there, just to convince that you haven't just made an old Thai network or your friends from university. Thank you.
Yeah, in the transformation of the cement business that you described how you've worked on the why, really to bring all the organization behind it. Were there any unexpected positive surprises in how you forged the leadership team in this?
Yes, many positive surprises, and I was interested to hear the analogy about always needing or usually needing an enemy or something to focus on, and the positive surprise is how people can coalesce and be mobilized by something very positive, mm-hmm. and how optimism can drive. In a company that has a very long history and expects a very long future, being humble and moderate and careful is a core value. So on that, we had to add a dose of heavy optimism, looking at not what might go wrong, but all the things that can go much better. And it has been really impressive to see, both at a personal level, but also as a team, how much that can mobilize everyone. I think the other very positive thing, and maybe that's more on a personal side, is that I think transformation makes you realize that you need to be transforming personally as a leader. I don't think we know how to do that. I think, or at least I don't think I know how to do that. I think this is something where we're all learning, we're adapting, and you need to have a deliberate, your job is to continuously assess, is my leadership style working? How does this need to be adapted? And how can this be cascaded in the whole organization? Through programs that we have, like our Young Leaders program, our Succession for Country Managers program, many other things. How can you really cascade this concept that in order to transform an organization, you need to be continuously transforming yourself, and that's actually a very positive thing.
Thank you. Vasily, I'd like to come back to the situation you described both in the financial crisis and then later in COVID, where you said, look, you could sit down around a table with a leadership team and basically 3 members of the family, the chairman, your brother and yourself as the CEO, to discuss how you deal with that situation and that crisis. Is there in your mind a difference when you shape a high-performing leadership team in a company where you have so much family presence?
Right, a very good question, because actually, I have put this question to myself many times, and I think the most important thing is not to be insecure. I always choose people in my team that in their area, they are better than me. I mean, I cannot be the best CFO, I cannot be the best HR, I cannot. So I choose people that they have this leadership element, they have the knowledge, the strong background, the ambition, they share the same vision, and I like them to be amplifiers of the message. And me, of course, being the leader and the coordinator. So it's a team effort, and I think that's the way to go forward, regardless if you're a multinational or a family company or anywhere in between.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Very quick, one example from every one of you. I mean, you've so much experience with successful transformations. What's the one thing you wished you had not done? Andreas, you can get started.
Many things. I think I should have been more forceful on some things that I knew they were wrong, but at the time, I judged that I'd rather not open too many frontiers. But later on, some things come back to you and remind you that you should have tackled. So timing of, let's say, confrontation, because transformation is about change. Sometimes you look back and say, I wish I had been more forceful there.
Thank you. Yanni?
Having hesitated. Okay. So not having really jumped into the transformation. After you go, you say, oh, I should have done that sooner, earlier.
Vasily?
Well, it's not a time for confessions, but nevertheless, I would say yes, the speed and, let's say, the determination in putting some changes and internal reforms forward, because if a company is being around for so many years, obviously you have the generation gap, and somehow, you need to give the right motivation to the new generation to go forward, but on the same time, you don't want to become the old team obsolete, so you have to make compromises, and maybe that's the most difficult, let's say, part.
Thank you to all. Look, I think there are some pervasive themes that I found very interesting and also very rewarding. I think the fact that you all said you need to tackle even a very unstable, volatile situation like now with a lot of optimism. How do you mobilize your organization around a positive vision of where you'd like to go? Yanni, you also said in a transformation, the why we're doing it is probably even more important than the how are we going to do it. Andreas, you made the point of saying sometimes you hesitate too much and you don't pick that fight at the point where you should have picked it. And then, Vasily, what I also found very interesting when you reflected on your leadership principles is that a good CEO should be judged by their actions and, in a way, by their wisdom and ability to pick an even better successor. So thank you all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Judith.
And have a good afternoon.